Okay, the infamous Weber Smokey Mountain. Have finally been able to get my hands on one of these off the Facebook Marketplace for an easy $100. This is an 18-inch. Essentially, how it works is, according to the diagram there, you have a water pan that separates the coals from the bottom and the two grates of the food, or where the food will go. And so this is me going to learn how to use this thing. It's supposed to be one of the easier beginning smokers to use, but like all the smokers I've tried out, there is a learning curve. For those of you who have actually owned one, you can see I modded it. I added garage door handles to lift out the inner chamber easily, and casters as well, because it's not heavy, but it is bulky, so now it's much easier to move around. The grate's in okay condition, nothing to complain about. Overall, I think it was a pretty good deal. So this is the side opening panels for you to add more charcoal or wood during a cook, but I've got a big gap up here, and I don't know if that's all of them or just the smoker only, but we'll deal with it. So in a nutshell, the way it works is you lift that whole panel up and then the top half, and you add charcoal to the firebox on the bottom. And then we're gonna light this using something called the minion method. Here's a quick description on what the minion method is. Here I'm adding a chunk of pecan wood, and I'm trying two ways here. I'm gonna try putting the wood under the lit charcoal, and I'm also gonna put a chunk of more pecan wood on top of the lit charcoal. So as the charcoal is lit, it'll light up the rest of the unlit charcoal in there and smolder the wood, producing smoke all throughout the chamber. Therefore, we have a smoker. We're going to dial down these intakes, because as the temperature gets to where you want it, you provide less air throughout the chamber. And it's supposed to be slow and steady, and as they say, set it and forget it. So I'm really trying to figure out what specific dial each of these, the intake and the exhaust on top, should be so that it will hold at a certain temperature. I'm also not using the included water pan, which supposedly is supposed to keep the temperatures down and moisture into the chamber. I'm just using it just straight up charcoal and the rack in there. I'm just curious to see how hot it will get without using it. However, just like my Kamado Acorn style cooker, it does take a lot of finicking around the dials to really get this thing to settle down. And so you can see I'm trying to close this because I noticed that my temperature kept rising. It's at 285. I kind of wanted it lower than that. So to prevent the temperature from going any higher, you have to cut down the intake. And I managed to cut down all three of them, and also I cut down the top exhaust, which I would soon discover that most people that use this, they keep that top exhaust wide open the whole time. And the actual thermometer is somewhat accurate. It makes sense that at the dome it's around 260, but I have got a thermometer with my Thermo Pro at the grate at 296 now. So I ended up cooking a chicken breast on it. I didn't really shoot any of that because this is not a learning how to barbecue a chicken breast. It's one of the easier things to cook as long as you've got a thermometer, but this was a tasty piece of chicken, not that much different than other barbecued pieces of chicken I tried on other cookers. So we're gonna try this cooker now using lump charcoal, as they do say to use briquettes, but we'll see what lump does for us this time. So my goal for this cook was to use a starter so that I can creep up to my temperature a little bit slower. I was shooting for a 225 to 250 smoking temperature. I'm going to use the water pan this time, and I am going to measure the temperature of both the grates, putting a thermometer on each grate. And you might be asking, why not use the dome thermometer? Well, that thermometer measures the temperature of the dome, and you want to know the temperature at the grate, at both grates. And I was just curious to see what would be the difference between the two grates and if it's really drastic or not. One of the things I'm attempting to cook here is kind of a fake brisket. That's a It's still a tough piece of meat. It's a sirloin cap, and I'm going to try to cook it like a brisket because I don't want to waste the whole brisket. I'm also going to do ribs, but I unfortunately didn't get a shot of me putting the ribs in there. And here's what happened. The temperatures got too high too fast because I forgot, or at least realized, that lump charcoal gets hot, and it gets hot fast. And if it gets to any temperature, as you can see, or any air into it, it's going to quickly get hot, and it's much harder to control. By dialing down the bottom vents, and I had to dial down the top vents, I eventually got it to a nice temperature, and it was a struggle trying to keep this down, and you could see the alarm going off and on. I had to keep adjusting and whatnot to finally get it to a decent smoking temperature, and unsurprisingly, the top rack was a lot hotter than the middle rack or the bottom rack. I guess, of course, because hot air rises and stuff. But you know, the brisket turned out okay, but the ribs were pretty amazing. Probably because I followed a recipe that I got off of YouTube. And I think one thing I probably messed up on is the position of the thermometers. The thermometers were kind of lined up on the edge, as you could see. I actually changed it, and heat was rising through the sides, and there might have been the thermometers might have been inaccurate and maybe too hot than I actually thought they were. You could see the bottom one should have been scooted in more because the heat was going around the water pan, and the thermometer was reading that heat going around. I should have read more in the middle of it. But not sad about the food. The ribs especially, were really good. I mean, I probably won't smoke a sirloin cap again because it didn't taste as good, but these ribs, and I will link a recipe that I actually used there. I can't remember right now which one I actually followed, but it involves the one wrapping it in butter and brown sugar and stuff. Okay, to cleaning up a thing, which is usually my biggest concern when it comes to a smoker. You gotta take out all this and you deal with this huge mess right here, which is what I was worried about. I read up on some things, what they do. People say they take their ashes and then dump it into a trash can and then dump that stuff, the ooey gooey stuff, on top of that. Because you're not supposed to throw this into the grass, and you're not supposed to put it in the trash or in the sink. But hey, any tips or whatever of how to actually clean this thing, or tips whatever if I made any huge mistakes with it, because overall I am pretty happy with this thing. I want to really figure it out how people get it to be set it and forget it low and slow perfectly, because every smoker is built differently. So please like and subscribe and give me any suggestions. This is RyanFriday out.